I started as an environmental organization. I started in '95. In 2002, just to give you an idea, we translated actually the death of environmentalism into Hebrew. The way that we read environmentalism from the beginning was different than the way environmentalism was read in Israeli society. Environmentalism in Israel is very similar to the kinds of things that Death of Environmentalism was criticizing in America. And the posture that we chose from the very beginning, that environment isn't this pure thing out there, but rather is completely connected to social issues, economic issues, political issues, cultural issues, and to put those things on the table were the central narratives of what we were doing. So I run an environmental organization, but that environmental organization was and still is essentially a sort of think tank, or what we like to call it, a think and do tank, which has tried to change the conversation and to try to therefore change the agenda of what environmentalists were trying to do. So in that way, it's very similar. It was paradigmatic shifting. It was working. We call it people and ideas. We believe that social change is going to take place if we have better and sharper ideas that are out there, and if we have a group of people that are talented that can go out there, network together, not just individuals, but rather groups of people that are sharing common visions of what Israeli society should be, what the role of environment is in Israel, and are connected together so that they can work together and see themselves as part of a larger community of people for social change. And so that's what the change. We're not policy driven. We're not driven by advocacy. We're driven really by empowering people and bringing ideas to the table and letting that group of people and that community of people do the work in the field. About 2 years ago, I started a think tank. A think tank that is built on a lot of the infrastructures that we built at the Heschel Center, the intellectual infrastructures, the sociological infrastructures that we built there, and understood in a very similar way to what they were doing here. Like somebody said, I thought this was an environmental kind of group. They started with Death of Environmentalism, and here we are at a conference about modernizing liberalism, a much wider agenda than the environmental piece. And in a very similar way, and I think for some very similar reasons, we started doing a similar move. And so I started a think tank called Shacharit, Creating Common Cause. And its goal was basically to rethink the ideas on which liberalism, or leftist politics as we call it in Israel, are based, given the fact that the left in Israel has been shrinking constantly over the last 10 years to a place where it's almost become insignificant to Israeli politics. And our claim is that it's become insignificant not simply because the public is not public is stupid, or we haven't marketed our ideas right, but there are fundamental problems with the very ideas of Israeli left today, and that we need to rethink those things in real ways. That when in a democracy, when people don't vote for your ideas, that should be a wake-up call to you that there's something wrong with what we're saying, right? Because we believe that people actually are capable of looking forward to what the common good is, and if they don't perceive of what you're doing as part of the common good, then you've got to rethink those things. So we set up Shacharit as essentially an attempt to both rethink the ideas that form the basis, in the belief that in the 21st century, politics are going to be very different than the 20th century, and the ideas that are going to underlie politics in Israel need to be very different, and that we have to take seriously the ideas that are out there in Israeli society, the conflict between leftist perspectives and where the public is, and to rethink and reanalyze and rearticulate a set of ideas around that. And the last 2 years, what we have been doing also in similar ways to this, although less intellectually driven, although we have a strong intellectual group that's working as well. One of the things that we've done is simply gone around the country. One of the lovely things about Israel is just a really small place, and so you can do that. You can't do that here, but there you can do it. So we had a working group of 25 people. And every 3 months we went for a 2-day seminar someplace else in the country. We went for 2 days to meet with ultra-Orthodox Jews. We went to 2 days to Nazareth, which is the heart, basically the cultural capital of Israeli Arabs. We went to 2 days to the West Bank to meet with Jewish settlers, something that's considered an anathema to the leftist community. Right? Going there is not an endorsement of what they do, but just to listen. 2 days with Russian immigrants in Ashdod to hear what they have to say. In other words, we just touch the breadth and length of Israeli society to start opening ourselves up to a wider conversation. And through that, we believe, we'll start articulating different ideas. And we've also tried to build through that a coalition of a much wider swath of people that are normally involved in this. So in the core of Shacharit, we will have Jews and Arabs and religious and secular, and North African-born Jews and Ashkenazic-born Jews, people from the center of the country and people from the periphery. And it turns out that when you bring different people into the room, even if they share, loosely put, common values, what they're going to articulate is different. I think that one could say in certain ways, but clearly kind of the context is everything. And so it's both enormously similar and radically different, right? And it's both of those things are true. It's enormously similar because a lot of the failures of liberalism or of kind of leftist politics writ large in Israel are very similar to the kinds of things that we're being talking about here. And yet at the same time, the contexts are very different. They're obvious, right? Israel is a war-torn country where its very existence is still one of debate, both on a theoretical level and also on just kind of the basic day-to-day security kinds of questions that are around that. The issues that blew away America in 2001 with the Al-Qaeda attacks, on 9/11, have been the underpinnings of the politics in Israel since 1948 and certainly since 1967. That's where they are. That's going to shift the conversation. The rich economic conversation that we were having here, which formed the basis of the conversation about the future of liberalism, is not the central conversation in Israel. The central conversation in Israel and the future of liberalism is multiculturalism, is how do you build a verified, a country out of so many different voices and has some common thread that holds those people together. Security issues, defense issues, how do you build? One of my big issues is, apart from the question of peace, which I think the left has done a pretty good job of articulating what that peace is going to look like, but it's done a very poor job of describing what a security policy should look like. How does one defend themselves? And the effect of that is that the left is always forced into two binary responses, either completely recapitulating to a rightist agenda of what security looks like. And so we had a war in Gaza, which was, let's just bomb the hell out of them. It was, what was it called in Iraq? Shock and I forget what, by
shock and awe.
Shock and awe. So we had our version of shock and awe. That's what we did. That's what we did in the Lebanon war. That's what we did in the war in Gaza. And came right out of the right-wing playbook. Or the flip side of it, kind of the second option that's put out there, is I call it a de facto pacifism. There is no situation where we should be articulating defense, use of arms, right? Between those two possibilities, there is a host of possibilities are out there. Those are the kind of things that need to be articulated. So those are very different than the conversation that was going on here. The conversation that was going on here was much more driven by, okay, economic policy, social policy, where those things stand. Those are, in Israel, second-tier questions. Right? The first-tier questions have much more to do with cultural identity, religious identity, national identity, and how that plays itself out in its relationship with its neighbors and in the Middle East, et cetera. So.